What's up, everybody? Welcome back to my continued trek through the Mushoku Tensei Jobless Reincarnation novel series. We're on Volume 4, now Chapter 3. I have to say, the more and more I get further into this Volume 4, there's so much more interesting additions to the novel series that was never adapted into the anime series, and that's usually what I kind of come here for. So when I do have a segment of chapters where I was like, yeah, nothing was really different in the anime, it sort of let me down, but this is definitely where we get into some nitty-gritty stuff, so let's jump right into Chapter 3. Following Ruijerd getting his demon eye from Kishirika, we do have a little moment where Ruijerd, similar to before, is kind of angry that he once again has fallen into the hands of the man god. Like you mentioned earlier, he's starting to get frustrated because he keeps doing what the man god wants, and he's not supposed to be trusting the man god so much that he has the desire to pluck the eye that he just received out and stomp it on the ground, which is kind of funny. But shortly later, he ends up bumping into a guy that we all know based on the anime is Gallus. It was interesting because I didn't note this in the previous video, but yes, technically when he was in the alleyway, the person that he hit with the rocks was actually somebody that Gallus knew, which was something that was not in the anime. In the anime, he just goes in the alleyway, he sees Kishirika, he helps her, and that's it. Well, actually, when he bumps into this guy, Gallus, Ruijerd bumps him out of the way for the flower pot, but Gallus was going to draw his weapon. And he realizes once the flower pot hits the ground, oh, this kid just saved my butt. But additionally, Gallus asks him, I'm looking for this guy. Do you know if you've seen him? And he said, well, there's just this drunk guy that's in the alleyway over here. It's probably him. And so, again, a little bit extra, not that significant, but it sort of gives us an additional thing that he helped Gallus with, which technically comes into his favor later on. It wasn't just that he bumped into him and saved him from flowers, he actually helped him with a situation that Gallus was dealing with. Going back to Eris and Ruijerd, we end up having the whole discussion about the demon eyes. Ruijerd's kind of shocked, like, wow, I can't believe that she's revived. Ruijerd tells him about the fact that she's known as the Demon Empress of Resurrection, and also the Demon Emperor of the Demon Eyes. He knows that she's not really powerful in combat. Like, this is a leader, but yet she's not really powerful. It's more the fact that she has these things that others want to gain from her. She has the ability to change other people's eyes into demon eyes. And yes, of course, Eris is like, I want to go out there and see if I can find her so I can get one of these demon eyes. Cutting forward, we have a little brief training montage. Ruijerd is trying to figure out how to use the eye. He explains there's two different ways of actually focusing the eye itself by, of course, applying it mana. One is the opaqueness, which is essentially his ability to be able to see that future sight. So as he was explained earlier, when he first got the eye, he could see double. The first vision was the current time, whereas the second vision was where he was seeing into the future. So he can adjust how much that's visible. So essentially he could probably be able to see normally out of that eye if he kind of tunes that mana properly. And of course the other adjustment is how far into the future that he can see. He says he can see 2 seconds into the future, but like the further he goes, it seems like it starts to branch. Like he's seeing more than just 2 vision because essentially each possibility is playing out. So the further in the future you get, the more possibilities of what can happen. He says he was able to get it up to 5 seconds, but then he started getting a headache. Once again, we get some talk about how Ruijerd is continuing to train Eris and that he's hoping they're not fooling around. He even knows the fact that he had a dream once that his older self showed up and called him a loser because essentially this guy has run off with your girl. This is where we have this moment where Eris spars with Ruijerd, and of course he uses eye, which allows him to be able to get the upper hand of her and defeat her, which, as we all know, really upsets her, really makes her mad. Ruijerd kind of pointing out the fact that, yeah, she just beat me for the first time, which, as we all know, is because he was preoccupied by watching Roxy, but still, she finally got her first win. She was feeling very confident, and Ruijerd, who's not really a physical fighter, ended up beating her. It really knocked her down. In his conversation with Eris, he kind of is noted as being a cheater. Like, he had this ability to just fall into his lap. It wasn't something he gained. Eris, on the other hand, has been training every single day, trying to get better and better, and Ruijerd just basically got one handed to him. He got talent handed to him. But he notes the heat and the sweat of Eris isn't really something that's, you know, arousing or whatever. It's more of a fact that it's as if her heat and her sweat on her body is criticizing him. That's her hard work. That is a sign of her hard work. And here he is again, not having gained anything. He said that the air itself felt heavy. It was cool because what all this teaches Ruijerd is that, again, hard work, something handed to him, and that he can't rely on it. He decided at this point that I'm not going to use the eye unless I need it because it's going to hamper my growth. Again, she doesn't have an eye, and she's working hard to get stronger, whereas if I rely on this, I'll never get stronger. In a sense, without her even saying anything, she basically taught him a lesson. Well, besides being upset that he beat her. At this point, Ruijerd is really trying to figure out, how are we going to get off this island? We need to get off the Demon Continent. What are my options? He figures, yes, we could probably do some gambling, but there's not really any gambling here. He even thought about sticking Ruijerd in some sort of fighting pin and seeing if he can find like a gladiator and taking down his opponents and betting off them, but he figures that eventually he's going to run out of opponents. And this is all frustrating him because he's basically spent all this time trying to figure out how to use his eye. He hasn't figured out a resolve. He's basically wasted a week. And it's that realization of that wasted time that it kind of drives him to a corner. He finally realized at this point, I don't have any options. I just sell the staff. Like, he figures at this point, I'm going to sell Aqua Hartia, and that'll get us across. Which, yes, of course, Ruijerd stops him. I always like this. I love this in the anime as well. This moment where he stops him and he says, what are you doing? I'm just going to go out to the red light district. Well, why do you need your staff with you? I don't know, there's some like to do a little bit of role play. No, you're going to sell that thing. Why are you selling that thing? Why are you doing this? Have I not gained your trust? That was the words that hurt. Why have I not gained your trust? Why are you going to go do this without even consulting us? You're not even going to tell me? You're not going to ask me my opinion on this? And he figures the only other option he has right now is to find a smuggler. And he doesn't want to do that because he doesn't want to make Ruijerd upset. He doesn't want to lose what he just finally gained of Ruijerd, that trust. And yet right now, he's literally squandering it. He's basically stepping on it. He says that's important to you. Are you going to sell this necklace next? That option's not really off the table. Realizing at this point, you're avoiding going to a smuggler because you don't want to offend me. But yet you're going to go out of your way to sell this staff, sell this necklace, which is going to cause a conflict for you. It's going to cause a conflict for Eris. Why is it? It's pretty much pointing out the idea of why is the only person that you're worried about stepping on their toes is me. You're going to ruin it for yourself. You're going to regret that. Down the road, we're going to part ways and you're going to regret having sold that staff. He tells him, look for a smuggler. I'll turn a blind eye to it. Look for a smuggler. Which, yes, one just happens to fall right in the lap because Gallus shows up right then. Gallus Cleaner shows up and pretty much, thanks Ruijerd for, yeah, you helped me find my guy over there. I like to return my favors, so it sounds like you need a smuggler. I'll help you out. But he does need one additional favor on top of it. Ruijerd's thinking, okay, so you're trying to return a favor, but you want more of a favor. That doesn't really make much sense. But Ruijerd says at this point, he's like thinking, was this all a part of Once again, we're doing this. He thinks to himself, is this part of his plan? Again, was going down the alleyway all about Kishirika getting the eye, or was it to stop this guy and tell Gallus where he's at? Again, this goes in that whole thing where, yes, that part is missing, but it technically makes more sense here. It's an additional aspect to the story. Everything sort of links together. Again, Gallus isn't doing this just because he knocked a flower pot out from underneath him. He also did it because he helped him find this guy, which probably he wanted to probably beat him up or something or get something out of him. But it all kind of ties together for the actual story itself. But it's interesting because, yes, the extra additional help that he needs is that he wants them to be smuggled over here, but with everything that kind of gets transferred over, it has to be held at a location. And he wants them, once they travel over, to go to this location and just basically free the cargo that's at this location, which of course they assume is probably people. But the idea here is that what Gallus tells them is that having these things is a bad thing. Having this cargo is not a good thing. I want you to free it because I don't want this to cause a problem for my friends, and they won't listen to me. So I want you to just go in there as a third party, get those things free, and then all will be good. Which, yes, we all know, based on the anime, that's exactly what he's doing. We know exactly what he's doing here. And it was kind of interesting because the way they're technically explaining this is that they're essentially going over there. They're going to get smuggled over there, but technically they're going to be helping free people. They're going to be stopping criminals. And so this sort of makes it better for Ruijerd. Ruijerd kind of accepts it a little more because of that. Either way, Ruijerd leaves it to Ruijerd. It's your decision if we do it or not. The next chapter we have is Side Story Missed Connections Extra Stories. So this is going to be Roxy's perspective in the actual Windport. Now, yes, as most people know, I love Roxy, so any chapter of Roxy is just great for me. It's actually been, last time we had a chapter with Roxy was back when she first seen the note back at Buena Village. It was funny because back then I noted the idea that in the anime, for some reason, she met Talhand and Elinalise at the Buena Village, which no. It actually explains in this chapter where she does find them and adds quite a bit more to these characters. Again, this is a lot of that extra stuff that I just absolutely eat up. But yes, opening up the chapter, Roxy arrives at Windport in the Demon Continent. She talks about how this kind of deja vu because the Mills Continent, Zantport, is quite similar. But she does note that the air is very different in the Mills Continent compared to the Demon Continent. And this is where we get a little bit of insight into, I guess, the history of Roxy herself and how she gets this little moment of deja vu. She talks about how 15 years ago, she envied the humans and fled her village. The moment that she hit the Mills Continent's Milshan and ate the sweets that the humans made, she was shocked. It was at that moment that she realized, I am never gonna eat the food of the Demon Continent ever again. She never wanted to return. Unlike the Demon Continent, there's so many new, fresh, and new things that she can discover. And ever since leaving, the Demon Continent never crossed her mind. Even when she had brushes with death in the labyrinth, her parents didn't even cross her mind. Very sad. Very sad. This is where we get an introduction of the dwarf and the elf that's with her. Elinalise Dragonroad, a warrior, a vanguard. This is a lady, though, similar chest size as Roxy, has a really attractive figure. She's well balanced, so to speak. And this is interesting because it notes the weapons that she carries. An S-stock, which is a weapon that's typically used by the nobles for fencing, for little duels. She used it for thrusting, but the interesting thing about it itself is that it's magical. It's from the depths of a labyrinth. She says that one single wave of this weapon can create a wind vacuum that could cut down trees meters away. Additionally, the buckler that she carries is also magic. It has the ability to mitigate any attack. Talhand, on the other hand, this dwarf, it seems like he's about the same height as Roxy, but he's like really thick. Like he's really big, twice as big. He moves very slowly. It seems like he's very seasick from being on the boat. But it notes the fact that even though the fact that he's a magician, he has like heavy armor, which seems very odd, and Roxy even herself questions it. But it makes sense when you think about it because this is a dwarf that moves very slowly. And so he figures that if, something attacks him, he's not gonna be able to run away. So he gets really heavy armor so that he can take those attacks while he casts magic. This is where we get an explanation of where she met these two adventurers. No, it wasn't at Buena Village. Instead, she came across them in the city of the East Port of Dragon King's realm. She talks about the fact that these two are just really easy to bicker. She found the two of them bickering, and the only reason that they caught her attention is that they were talking about somebody missing from the Fitoa region. They had plans to travel to the Demon Continent, but the both of them were not really good at geography. Talhand was talking about how he wanted to go to the Begaret, or Northern Central Continent, since he knew the lay of the land, while Elinalise was talking about how she wanted to go to the Demon Continent. Despite the fact that she could get lost, she still felt the necessity to go there to search for people, even if they had to hire somebody. Now, why Roxy ultimately decides to interact with these two, even though they're sitting here arguing and talking about finding these people, is that they specifically mention being former party members of Paul and Zenith. And even more specifically, the Fangs of the Black Wolf, which this catches her off guard. Roxy had no clue that Paul and Zenith were a part of such a very famous group. They were a very popular group around the Central Continent. They were known to having one or two odd quirks about them that really made them the talk of the town. This is a group that rose to S rank in just a few short years before they disbanded, obviously, because yes, the whole thing with Zenith getting pregnant. Equally, these two are very shocked to learn about Roxy. It's this young blue-haired magician that hailed from the Demon Continent, who also is very well known across the lands. Tales of her entering the University of Magic and obtaining Water Saint tier in just a few years. She traversed a maze on the outskirts of the Shirone Kingdom that was 25 levels deep, and she took her seat as one of the Shirone Kingdom's core magicians. So in the end, these three standing here, Roxy looking for Rudius, and these other two basically honoring Paul's request, despite the fact that it seems like the two of these don't really like Paul. And thus the three of them set off, boarded a ship to the Mills Continent, Westport, used a whole lot of money to get these very expensive horses and carriages, which apparently is not much of a problem for them as their purses are very deep. And during their travel across the Mills Continent, it seems as if Roxy takes note that they're going a little out of their way in order to avoid certain areas. Specifically, they avoid the capital of the Milshan because their old party members there, Paul, and not getting along with their kin, they avoid the Blue Worm Mountains of the Dwarves and the Great Forest, which the Elves settlement is at. Instead, opting to go straight to Zantport. Thankfully, due to this, though, they pretty much arrived in record time. An interesting note that comes up later is they specifically make up the excuse that rain is about to come into the area. But Roxy right here is obviously assuming, no, they're just making up excuses because they don't want to have a run-in with their homes. Because the rain that comes in is pretty heavy stuff. And again, this is something that comes up later. Changing scenes, we arrive at Adventure Guild. Elinalise is pretty excited. There's lots of adventure men there, and she just cannot wait to dig in. Yes, we find out very quickly that Roxy does not like how promiscuous this girl is. She absolutely loves the smell of men. Roxy, on the other hand, is seemingly jealous. She's kind of pointing out that, they need to focus on what they're doing. But additionally, it's not as if anybody really kind of confronts her anyway. She notes specifically that anytime she does get confronted by people, party members, it's typically children, which obviously doesn't really necessarily technically work for her because typically these young men are D rank, and even if she wanted to, she wouldn't be able to party with them because they're so low rank. This could probably be because the troubledoors that sing her songs of her exploits apparently didn't know that she's actually a Migard, and so they just assume that she's a 12-year-old girl that's really good at magic. They over-dramatize her exploits, talking about how she achieved A rank in 2 years. Some even say she became A rank in a year. Well, she says, yes, if I were to reset back to F rank, I probably could have pulled that off in a year, but not when I first started. She talks about how she used to party with these other young men, and they just weren't experienced. This is where she kind of reminiscens a little bit of the Rikarisu Gang, which was the group that she was with. After leaving the Migard village, she was obviously pretty lost, and this group of 3 guys pretty much brought her into the group and kind of took care of her. One was sarcastic, but good at looking out for others. One loved to curse people, but was also very determined. And one was clever and held the group together. Unfortunately, that last one apparently died during their journeys. And after so many years with them, they arrived at the Windport, and that's the point in which they disbanded. The 2 remaining, Nokopara, there's that name, and Blaze remained. So yes, Nokopara, the one that pretty much tried to blackmail Rudius. And yes, Blaze, the one they found at the Petrified Forest when they went there for that quest and everybody had their quests overlapping each other. Blaze was the big pig-faced guy that they ran into there, who unfortunately died to the snake. Roxy and her 2 party members come together to kind of discuss their future plans. They talk a little bit about how dead-end rumors are spreading like crazy, apparently about them being this up-and-coming group. They do know that people specifically say that they're good people, but it seems like they're a dangerous bunch and you should avoid them. And this is where we kind of have a little discussion about the priorities, kind of setting in stone what their focus is. Seems like both Elinalise and Talhand can vouch for Zenith. They know that she's fine. Wherever she gets put, she's going to be fine. They know that she is resourceful. They know that she is strong. Obviously, Roxy at this point, despite the fact the other 2s don't know him, can kind of vouch for Rudius as well. She knows that he's going to be safe. He's very resourceful. He's very strong. He's a witty kid. But the problem lies in Lilia and Aisha. They don't really know much about him. Yes, Roxy knows Lilia, but doesn't know what she's capable of. Additionally, Aisha, the only thing that she knows about Aisha is what Rudius basically wrote in his letters to her. She'd never seen her before. Now, the sad news is that based on their hearings of rumors, there doesn't seem to be any rumors in the areas of any displaced citizens. Nobody popping up out of nowhere, which does kind of lead them to have a little bit of fear there. It's been a year already, and if there's no reports, then it's probably a good chance that any citizens that came here are dead. That's one of those interesting moments right here is we get into like kind of the nitty gritty of what they're doing. The search party. Now, interestingly enough, we do get a brief sign of how the kingdoms themselves are reacting to the displacement incident, but really all we see is the punishment of Saros. We don't really see anything else. But here, Roxy actually talks about it. As they go to each one of these towns, as sort of a search party for the Asura Kingdom, they're able to submit missing persons. And if they submit this to the adventure guilds, the Asura Kingdom will actually pay for it. So essentially, if they can go to each of these towns, submit a missing persons report, a person takes on that request, finds somebody, the Asura Kingdom will pay them. So it doesn't come out of Roxy's pocket. They can go to each one of these towns, submit, and the Asura Kingdom will cover it. But that's pretty much all the Asura Kingdom is doing. And Roxy's noting this right here. She's very disgusted. She hates how this kingdom is handling this displacement. She said that they should be taking proactive actions. And here's the sadder part. She knows that the only people that are handling this search endeavor is herself and Paul's party. That's the only people that are doing anything. Which again, I would assume that she could have found out if there's search parties happening when she arrived at Buena Village. But it seems like the only person that's taking action right now is Paul and herself. And technically Talhand and Elinalise. Pretty much people responding to the letter that Paul made. So thus, Paul is the only person looking for anybody. Paul is the only one that's creating this whole system. And yes, spoilers for the later part of the first season, the moment you finally get that reintroduction to Paul, you see how frustrated he is. He's doing this all himself. He's trying to form these parties and they're going out and they're searching for people on the streets and everything, trying to save people. And again, this paints the grim picture that they're the only ones doing it. The Asura Kingdom doesn't care. And what little they care is just giving up money for... We don't even know how much they're rewarding them for. Giving up a little money to find people. And you would assume, and this is completely not in the novel, I would assume that whatever they're paying for those missing people is probably less than what people are getting by selling those people. But yeah, anyways, that sucks. moving on. After kind of deciding what their main focus is on, again, one of their biggest primary, focus is to find Lilia and Aisha. We have a little moment where Roxy sort of reflects on how she is, how she makes decisions so quickly and doesn't really linger on things. She kind of mentions that this is kind of why she did what she did with Ruijerd. The moment that she taught him what he needed to do, she immediately left. She's not one to linger. And she knows that Ruijerd probably thought that she was an airhead for doing that, but she considered it as a strength. The swift decisions is her forte, and everybody wonders why I like Roxy so much. I'm the same way. It's like I don't like sitting here just really sticking on something. Just make a decision and move on. If it's a hard decision, make the decision and move on. After this, we get all these little goofy scenes where Roxy goes and sees Ruijerd training Eris, doesn't know who they are, but she's immediately terrified by Ruijerd and runs away. Eventually, yes, she overhears Elinalise and storms in there and finds her with like 5 men and blasts them. The next day, they're all leaving the town, Roxy, Elinalise, and Talhand. And you have this little moment where, yeah, Roxy's really mad at Elinalise and what she's doing, and Elinalise is talking about how it's so great having these 5 men, just loves being around them. You should find a man. And we have this little brief moment where Roxy starts to think about pretty much her ideal man. In the anime, I think we get like this little brief moment where she says that she has this fantasy about going into some labyrinth and finding a guy, but we get a little more detailed in the novel series. She says specifically that she never really thought about marriage or love until her encounter with Paul and Zenith. At that time, she recalled the acquaintance that she had at the university, who talked about how she met her husband in the depths of a maze. The two of them overcame everything and eventually got married. So yeah, Roxy sort of thought, one day I could find that ideal man in a labyrinth. Young, tall, fashionably dressed. He would save her. The two of them would combine their strength to escape. The man would discover that they lost their friend, and she would have to comfort him. And that night, they would spend their first night together. However, it's so sad. I could just see the disappointment in Roxy. I feel bad. However, her first journey to a labyrinth didn't turn all that great. Her fantasies were shattered. It was a harsh place, and of course, all the venturers were just a stern lot. Roxy, yes, being a Migard, was pretty much the only youthful-looking one. I talked about how by the 5th floor, she noticed that there's really no solo adventures anymore. And by the 10th floor, this is the point when she realized she was going to need a party. Yes, she made it all the way to the 10th floor alone before she realized that I should probably get a party. But unfortunately for her, everybody mocked her. They thought that she was a child. So when she got sick of pretty much all these people mocking her, she decided, I'm just gonna go alone. And she came so close to death so many times, but she got out alive, obviously, and she claimed that she would never, ever repeat that mistake again. Even still, after all this stuff, she still sort of hopes in that dream that was shattered. But even still considers the idea that, one of these days I can probably just fall in love like normal people, have a normal marriage, yada yada. But even still, with all that said, she has no desire to give herself up to some man that she doesn't even know their name like Elinalise does. Moving on to chapter 4, we cut back to Ruijerd, sadly. I know, I'm sad too. Ruijerd has been sitting around waiting for 15 days, waiting for word from the smuggler. That's when they finally get note. They have to put Ruijerd onto this boat. They cover his head and they take him off. And yes, just as he predicted, they propel the boat with magic. They went and they sold their lizard mount. This is kind of funny because this is, again, one of those things that you never see in the anime. At some point, they take this lizard. You see them in the anime. They were riding this lizard around everywhere. They finally take this to this lizardman guy. I forget the exact name of the race. Like Jalil, this kind of lizard race person that are really good at beast taming. They take it to that person. They sell it. And the guy actually says, man, this thing's really well trained. And yeah, Eris is over there. She's hugging it and crying because she loves this lizard so much. He's sort of become a family member. Now, Ruijerd sort of notes that I didn't train it. Ruijerd did. Like, Ruijerd was the one that knew how to train it. This thing hated him. Like, this thing hated Ruijerd. Like, he bit him multiple times. But yeah, the trainer's like, yeah, you guys did a really good job. This thing's really well trained. It's going to be really easy for me to resell it because I don't have... Usually, people treat their mounts so terribly that he has to retrain them every time. After this, they head to the ships. They jump on a ship to go to Zantport. This is where we get a little bit into Ruijerd's mind as they travel on the ship. He, of course, has all these crazy fantasies. We're going to get attacked by a ghost ship. We'll probably shipwreck. It'll just be me and this girl, and we'll have this... Yeah, she might not like me at first, but over time we'll grow this bond and frolic on the beaches together. Then yes, there's the idea that we could get attacked by some crazy squid or octopus that will do crazy things to all the women and yes, wrap everywhere around their body. All that crazy stuff that Ruijerd obviously is thinking about. But yes, the reality is not as great. Eris is over there vomiting in a bucket. The one time they get attacked by this crazy octopus thing, this group of S-rank adventurers just show up really quickly and take it down. Specifically, he talks about this group of adventurers known as the Aqua Road. And they're actually a specialized group that has a contract with the Adventure Guild, or at least with the Shipwreck Guild. So they're actually adventurers that get all the quests to escort these ships across the ocean. Because he talked about that. He went to the Adventure Guild and he was like, that's odd, there's no like escort missions or anything like that. Something that you would get on a ship and protect the ship. It's because this group has it all. He does kind of make comments about how these guys aren't that strong. He's kind of pointing out how each one of them is weaker than his own party. Oh, he's not as strong as Eris. That was not as strong as Ruijerd. I'm much better than that guy. But he knows specifically that these three, why they pull off what they do, is they're a great team. Each one of them performs their role perfectly. And so while he's sitting there mocking them individually, he realizes very quickly they're better than us as a group. He sort of reflects on that a little bit. Yes, over time, as our trip continues on, Eris is feeling very sick and he's having to constantly use healing spells to kind of help her. She's very weakened. She's just kind of slumped over. And yes, Rias has to fight his temptations a lot. So much that he decides to excuse himself, go handle his business and come back. But it's fine. They eventually arrive at Zamport. Of course, Eris is extremely excited. She's like, yes, thank goodness. He's like, you do realize we're going to have to go on another ship here soon. She's like, you're going to heal me, right? Yeah, but I don't know if I'm going to be able to help myself around you next time. And that's it. That's all I'm going to cover for the day. That's Chapter 3, Extra Chapter, and Chapter 4 of Volume 4 of Mushoku Tensei Jobless Reincarnation. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. As always, if you did, make sure to hit that like button down below and comment. Let me know what you thought of this whole bit, all this extra information that we got. Does this stuff interest you guys? I always eat it up, and I love talking about it. So, additionally, as always, if you want to support this channel, we have a Patreon link, a tips link, and a super thanks button down below. I would greatly appreciate if you guys consider supporting us. Additionally, if you've not already, make sure that subscribe button so you get all my content. I do news, reviews, first impressions. If it's anime, it's pretty much here. I thank you all for watching, and y'all take care.